One of the greatest mistakes you can make in your relationships with other people is to become addicted to their attention. You begin checking whether they noticed you, wondering why they did not respond, thinking about what their silence means, and changing your behavior simply to receive a reaction. Slowly, without realizing it, you give another person control over your emotional state. Your confidence rises when they notice you and falls when they don't. Your mood depends on their messages, their approval, their interest, and their attention. And the moment your emotional stability depends on someone else's behavior, you have surrendered something far more valuable than attention. You have surrendered your focus. The first step toward becoming socially powerful is to take that focus back. This does not mean becoming rude. It does not mean deliberately ignoring people to make them chase you. It does not mean pretending that you do not care. Those are games, and games eventually become exhausting. Real confidence is much simpler. It means you have a life that continues whether someone gives you attention or not. You have goals to pursue, skills to develop, responsibilities to handle, interests that make you curious, and a future that deserves your attention. When you become genuinely occupied with your own growth, you stop needing to manufacture distance because you naturally have somewhere else to place your energy. Think about the difference between someone who is waiting for attention and someone who is living with purpose. The first person constantly watches the door, waiting for someone to enter. The second person is already busy building something meaningful. If attention arrives, they appreciate it. If it does not, they continue moving. That difference creates a completely different psychological presence. People can sense when someone desperately wants to be noticed. The person who constantly seeks approval often speaks differently, behaves differently, and becomes overly concerned with how every action is perceived. They may agree with everything simply to remain liked. They may change their personality depending on who is watching. They may become available at every moment because they fear that saying no will make someone lose interest. But eventually, this behavior creates exhaustion because you are no longer living according to your own priorities. Now imagine the opposite. You are comfortable being yourself. You respond when you genuinely have something to say. You make time for people without abandoning your responsibilities. You can enjoy someone's attention without becoming dependent on it. You can appreciate a conversation without desperately trying to extend it. You can walk away from an interaction without wondering whether you somehow failed. That is emotional independence. And emotional independence changes the way people experience your presence. When you are not constantly trying to capture attention, you become more relaxed. When you are relaxed, you listen better. When you listen better, conversations become more natural. When conversations become natural, people feel less pressure around you. You are no longer performing. You are simply participating. This is why chasing attention is often self-defeating. The more desperately you try to make someone notice you, the more you become focused on their reaction instead of the quality of the interaction itself. You stop listening because you are thinking about what to say next. You stop enjoying the moment because you are measuring whether the other person seems impressed. You become a spectator of your own behavior, constantly evaluating yourself through someone else's eyes. There is no freedom in that. Freedom begins when you stop asking, how can I make this person notice me? And start asking, what kind of person am I becoming? That question changes everything. Instead of spending hours wondering why someone did not reply, you return to your work. Instead of replaying a conversation because you think you said something imperfect, you learn from it and move forward. Instead of trying to force someone's interest, you allow their interest to develop naturally or not develop at all. You understand that another person's choice does not define your worth. This mindset is especially important because attention is temporary. Today, someone may be fascinated by you. Tomorrow, they may be distracted. One day, they may praise you. Another day, they may disagree with you. If your confidence rises and falls with these changing reactions, you will never experience stability. But when your confidence comes from your own standards, external attention becomes something you can enjoy without needing it to survive. There is also tremendous strength in having boundaries around your time. You do not need to respond instantly to every message. You do not need to cancel your plans whenever someone suddenly becomes available. You do not need to make yourself endlessly accessible just to prove that you care. Healthy availability is different from constant availability. You can value people while still valuing your own commitments. And this principle extends far beyond attraction. It applies to friendships, family, work, leadership, and every social environment you enter. The person who constantly seeks approval becomes vulnerable to pressure. The person who knows what matters to them becomes harder to push around. When your attention has direction, other people cannot easily redirect it. So stop measuring your importance by how much attention you receive. Measure yourself by the quality of the life you are building when nobody is watching. Build skills, strengthen your character, develop interests, keep your promises to yourself. Become curious about the world. Create goals that demand your concentration. The more complete your life becomes, the less desperate you become for someone else to complete it. And strangely enough, this is often when people begin noticing you differently, not because you learned a trick to make them chase you, but because you stop chasing validation yourself. The real power is not in making someone notice you. It is in becoming so focused on your own purpose that attention is no longer something you need to survive. There is a powerful difference between being silent and being absent. Silence creates space, and space allows people to notice what is no longer there. Most people are uncomfortable with this because they have been trained to believe that constant communication is necessary to maintain connection. They feel that if they do not message, respond, comment, explain, or constantly participate, they will be forgotten. But this fear often reveals something deeper, a dependence on constant reassurance. When you are comfortable with silence, you no longer feel compelled to fill every empty moment. You don't need to send another message simply because the conversation slowed down. You don't need to keep talking because you are afraid the other person might lose interest. You don't need to manufacture reasons to remain present in someone's attention. You allow space to exist, and within that space, something important happens. People have the opportunity to notice their own feelings. This is where many people misunderstand the psychology of attraction and social presence. The goal is not to deliberately ignore someone or create anxiety. That is not confidence. It is a game. Real confidence comes from being secure enough to allow another person freedom. You can care about someone without demanding their constant attention. You can enjoy conversation without needing it to continue endlessly. You can step away from your phone, return to your responsibilities, and allow the relationship to breathe. Think about a conversation that never ends. Messages arrive constantly. Every thought is immediately shared. Every pause is filled. At first, this may feel exciting, but eventually there is little room left for curiosity. You already know what the other person is doing, thinking, and saying every moment. Nothing has time to develop beneath the surface. Familiarity becomes constant exposure. Now imagine something different. Two people have a meaningful conversation, then return to their separate lives. One goes back to studying, working, creating, exercising, spending time with family, or pursuing personal interests. The other continues with their own life. Later, they reconnect with something new to discuss. The space between conversations gives both people experiences to bring back. The relationship has room to breathe rather than becoming an endless stream of messages. This is why having your own life is so important. When you are genuinely engaged in your goals, you naturally create space. You are not pretending to be busy. You are busy becoming someone. You are not withholding attention as a tactic. You are simply giving your attention to the things that matter. There is also a psychological benefit to not immediately reacting to everything. A pause gives you time to understand what you actually want to say. Instead of responding from anxiety, you respond from intention. Instead of asking yourself, what should I say so they keep talking to me? You begin asking, what do I genuinely want to contribute to this conversation? That small change creates authenticity. People often sense when communication is driven by desperation. When someone is constantly trying to maintain attention, their words become predictable. They agree too quickly. They ask questions they don't genuinely care about. They continue conversations after the natural ending because they fear that ending means rejection. But when you become comfortable with pauses, you stop forcing interactions beyond their natural rhythm. Sometimes a conversation should simply end, and that is not failure. A person who understands this does not panic when someone becomes temporarily unavailable. They do not immediately assume something is wrong. They do not create stories in their mind. They continue living. This emotional stability is important because uncertainty is a normal part of human relationships. You cannot control another person's mood, schedule, priorities, or feelings. Trying to control all of these things will only create anxiety. Instead, control what belongs to you, your behavior, your attention, your boundaries, and your response. Silence also gives you information. When you stop constantly initiating, you may discover who genuinely values the connection and who only responds when you provide all the energy. This is not a test. You are simply allowing the relationship to reveal its natural balance. Healthy relationships involve mutual effort. If communication only exists because one person constantly pushes it forward, the silence exposes that imbalance. And sometimes the result will not be what you hoped for. Someone may not reach out, someone may become less interested, someone may simply have a different rhythm of communication. This is where emotional independence becomes essential. You cannot turn every absence into a personal rejection. People have their own lives, circumstances, and choices. Respecting that reality protects both your dignity and theirs. The most attractive form of silence is therefore not calculated silence. It is peaceful silence. It comes from someone who does not need to prove their importance every minute. Someone who can put the phone down and return to their life. Someone who can enjoy another person's attention without becoming dependent upon it. When you develop that ability, something changes inside you. You become less reactive. You stop measuring your value by response times. You stop interpreting every pause as a message about your worth. You begin understanding that attention is something people freely give, not something you have to extract. And this principle extends far beyond attraction. In friendships, silence can create room for genuine appreciation. In professional environments, thoughtful pauses can prevent impulsive decisions. In difficult conversations, silence can stop emotional escalation. In your personal life, time away from constant stimulation allows you to hear your own thoughts more clearly. The world is already noisy. Everyone is competing to be seen, heard, noticed, and validated. The person who can remain comfortable without constantly demanding attention develops a rare kind of presence. They are not invisible. They are simply not desperate to be visible. So don't use silence to manipulate someone into chasing you. Use silence to return to yourself. Let people have space. Let yourself have space. Allow conversations to breathe. Allow relationships to develop naturally, and allow your attention to belong first to the life you are building. When you no longer fear silence, you no longer need to chase attention, and that is when your presence begins to speak for itself. There is a difference between protecting your time and making yourself unavailable to everyone. One is self-respect. The other can become a performance. If you want to develop genuine confidence, you must understand that your availability should come from choice, not fear. You should be able to care about people without abandoning your own priorities for them. You should be able to help someone without making yourself responsible for their every need. You should be able to say yes when you genuinely want to, and no when something conflicts with what matters to you. Many people struggle with this because they are afraid that boundaries will make them seem distant. They think that if they do not respond immediately, accept every invitation, or change their plans whenever someone asks, they will lose the other person's interest. So they become endlessly available. Their own schedule becomes flexible around everyone else's schedule. Their goals are postponed, their responsibilities are interrupted, their personal time disappears, and eventually they wonder why they feel exhausted. The problem is not that they care too much. The problem is that they have forgotten that their own life deserves consideration too. Imagine someone who has spent weeks working toward an important goal. They have created a schedule, committed to their responsibilities, and finally developed momentum. Then another person suddenly asks for their time. Instead of honestly checking whether they are available, they immediately abandon their plans because they are afraid of disappointing that person. One isolated decision may seem harmless, but repeated often enough, it creates a pattern. Their priorities become negotiable while everyone else's priorities remain fixed. A confident person understands something different. Respect begins with respecting your own commitments. This does not mean becoming selfish. Healthy boundaries are not walls designed to keep people away. They are guidelines that make relationships healthier because everyone understands where they stand. You can communicate clearly without being harsh. You can decline something without insulting anyone. You can protect your time without pretending that another person's request is unimportant. Sometimes the strongest sentence is simply, "I can't today." You don't need a dramatic explanation. You don't need to invent an excuse. You don't need to feel guilty for having other priorities. A simple, respectful boundary is enough. The fear of saying no often comes from a deeper desire for approval. You worry that if you disappoint someone, they will think less of you. But consider what happens when you constantly say yes simply to remain liked. You may receive temporary approval, but internally you become resentful because you are repeatedly betraying your own needs. Eventually, the relationship becomes unhealthy because the other person is interacting with a version of you that exists mainly to please them. Authenticity requires the courage to be honest about your limits. This is especially important in communication. If you are busy, You can say that you are busy. If you need time to yourself, you can take it. If you do not want to continue a particular conversation, you can politely step away. You don't need to disappear without explanation or deliberately create uncertainty. Clear communication is more powerful than calculated absence because it creates trust rather than confusion. And there is an important psychological distinction here. Being available when you genuinely want to be available feels completely different from being available because you are afraid of losing someone's attention. In the first situation, you are giving freely. In the second, you are giving under pressure. The first creates connection. The second creates dependence. Your time is one of the few resources you can never recover. Once an hour passes, it is gone. Once a day disappears, you cannot purchase it back. So learning to protect your time is not merely a social strategy. It is a life skill. The people who achieve meaningful goals understand that every commitment carries an opportunity cost. Saying yes to one thing means saying no to something else. This is why having priorities matters. If everything is important, nothing is truly important. You need to know what deserves your attention. Your education, work, responsibilities, family, health, creative interests, friendships, and personal goals all require different amounts of energy. You cannot give unlimited attention to everyone without eventually giving inadequate attention to yourself. There is also a subtle psychological effect when you maintain healthy boundaries. You become more present when you actually choose to spend time with someone. Because you are not constantly available, your attention has greater meaning. You are not distracted by resentment or exhaustion. You can actually listen, you can participate, you can enjoy the moment because you chose it rather than being pressured into it. This is what genuine confidence looks like. It is not acting distant. It is knowing that your life has value even when nobody else is paying attention to it. And sometimes boundaries reveal something important about other people. Someone who respects you will generally respect a reasonable no. They may be disappointed, but they understand that you have your own life. Someone who repeatedly pressures you, guilt trips you, or demands constant access to your time is showing you something about how they view relationships. You don't need to fight with them. You simply need to notice the pattern. Your boundaries become a filter. They help you distinguish between people who appreciate you and people who only appreciate what you provide. This is why you should never confuse endless availability with kindness. Kindness without boundaries can become exhaustion. Generosity without limits can become resentment. Communication without personal space can become dependence. The goal is balance. You should be capable of giving attention without losing yourself, caring without becoming consumed, and connecting without abandoning your own direction. When you protect your time and maintain your boundaries, you send a quiet message. Not that you are more important than everyone else, but that your life matters too. And when you genuinely respect your own time, you teach others how to respect it as well. If someone else's attention can determine your mood, then that person has more influence over you than they should. This is where emotional independence becomes one of the most important forms of personal power. You can appreciate attention without depending on it. You can enjoy someone's presence without becoming afraid of their absence. You can care about what another person thinks without allowing their opinion to become the foundation of your identity. Most people never notice how much of their emotional life is controlled by external reactions. A compliment makes them feel valuable. A criticism makes them question themselves. A delayed response makes them anxious. Being excluded makes them feel insignificant. They move through life as if other people are holding the remote control to their emotions. The problem is not that they have feelings. The problem is that they have surrendered authority over those feelings. Emotional independence begins when you recognize that another person's behavior is information, not a command. Someone may respond quickly or slowly. They may agree with you or disagree with you. They may show interest or remain distant. None of these reactions automatically determine your value. They tell you something about their current feelings, circumstances, priorities, or choices. You can observe that information without turning it into a judgment about yourself. This distinction is incredibly powerful. Imagine receiving a message from someone and not getting a response for several hours. The dependent mind immediately creates a story. Maybe they are upset. Maybe you said something wrong. Maybe they are losing interest. Maybe you should send another message. The mind begins creating explanations without evidence. Anxiety grows, and suddenly you are reacting to a story rather than reality. The emotionally independent person takes a different approach. They notice the absence of a response and continue with their day. If there is a genuine reason to communicate later, they communicate. If not, they return to their own priorities. They understand that uncertainty is part of life. They don't need to solve every unanswered question immediately. That calmness is not indifference. It is maturity. There is a tremendous difference between caring and depending. Caring means someone's happiness matters to you. Depending means your happiness requires their approval. Caring allows two people to remain individuals. Depending creates pressure because one person's emotional stability becomes responsible for the other person's emotional stability. Healthy connection requires freedom. Both people should be able to have their own interests, responsibilities, friendships, goals, and personal space. When you are emotionally independent, you don't need to constantly monitor another person's behavior. You can give attention freely rather than giving it because you fear losing them. This also changes the way you communicate. When you are desperate for approval, every conversation becomes a test. You analyze your words. You wonder whether you sounded interesting enough. You worry about whether the other person is impressed. You might even hide your real opinions because disagreement feels dangerous. But when you become emotionally independent, communication becomes simpler. You can express yourself honestly. You can disagree respectfully. You can admit when you don't know something. You can laugh at your own mistakes. You no longer need every conversation to confirm that you are worthy. And this is where genuine confidence begins. Confidence is not the belief that everyone will like you. That is impossible. Confidence is knowing that you will remain okay even when someone doesn't. It is the understanding that rejection, disagreement, or disappointment may hurt, but none of them have the authority to define your identity. This mindset also protects you from unhealthy attempts to gain attention. You no longer need to deliberately disappear so someone will chase you. You don't need to create jealousy. You don't need to pretend to be unavailable. You don't need to calculate every response. Those strategies require constant attention to another person's reaction, which means they actually make you more dependent, not less. True independence is much quieter. You simply live your life. You respond when you genuinely want to respond. You spend time with people because you enjoy their company. You maintain your responsibilities. You continue developing your interests. You protect your boundaries. You accept that some people will connect with you deeply while others will not. And you don't turn every difference into a personal crisis. There will always be people who misunderstand you. There will always be people who don't appreciate what you bring. There will always be situations where someone chooses a different direction. If your self-worth depends on preventing these things, you will spend your life fighting reality. Instead, build a stronger foundation. Know what you value. Know what you stand for. Know what kind of person you want to become. When these principles are clear, external opinions become less threatening because you have something internal to measure yourself against. This does not mean refusing all feedback. Emotional independence actually makes you better at receiving useful criticism because you don't automatically experience feedback as an attack. You can listen, evaluate, accept what is useful, and reject what is unfair. Your ego does not have to defend every part of you because your identity is not fragile. The same principle applies to attention. When someone gives you attention, appreciate it. When they don't, continue living. When someone chooses to spend time with you, enjoy the moment. When they are busy, respect their space. You don't need to turn every interaction into proof of your importance. The less you need approval, the more honestly you can connect. Eventually, you reach a point where another person's attention becomes a pleasant addition to your life rather than the source of your confidence. Their presence can make your day better, but their absence does not destroy it. Their opinion can be considered, but it cannot command you. Their affection can be appreciated, but it cannot become your identity. That is emotional independence. And when you no longer need others to validate your worth, you become free to connect with them without fear. The human mind is naturally drawn toward what it does not completely understand. When every detail is immediately revealed, there is little left to discover. But when someone allows a conversation, a friendship, or any social connection to develop naturally, curiosity has room to grow. This is why you should never confuse genuine mystery with calculated secrecy. You do not need to hide information, pretend to be unavailable, or deliberately ignore someone to make them interested. Real curiosity comes from having depth, not from playing games. Think about the difference between someone who is constantly trying to control how others perceive them and someone who is simply comfortable being themselves. The first person carefully chooses every word because they are trying to create a specific impression. They may exaggerate their achievements, hide ordinary parts of their life, or pretend to be interested in things simply because they believe those things will make them more attractive. But eventually, performance becomes exhausting. The person is no longer communicating. They are managing an image. The second person does something completely different. They are interested in the world around them. They have opinions, experiences, goals, hobbies, responsibilities, and ideas of their own. They do not reveal everything about themselves immediately, but they also do not hide themselves intentionally. They simply allow another person to discover them over time. That is natural curiosity. It begins with genuine interest rather than strategy. Instead of entering a conversation thinking, how can I make this person like me? You begin thinking, who is this person and what can I learn from this conversation? That small change removes enormous pressure. You stop performing and start listening. You stop searching for perfect lines and start responding to what is actually happening. Curiosity also means paying attention to what someone says instead of waiting for your opportunity to speak. If they mention an interest, you can explore it naturally. If they share an experience, you can respond to the experience rather than immediately turning the conversation back towards yourself. If something surprises you, say so honestly. Good conversation is not an interrogation where one person asks question after question. It is an exchange where both people contribute. This is why the idea of never ask questions should not be taken literally. Questions can be useful. The problem is asking questions mechanically, as if you are following a script. A conversation becomes uncomfortable when one person feels like they are being interviewed. Instead of constantly asking, you can make observations, share related experiences, express opinions, and respond thoughtfully. For example, if someone mentions that they enjoy a particular activity, you don't always need to immediately ask a question about it. You might share what you find interesting about that activity. You might mention something similar that you have experienced. You might simply respond with genuine enthusiasm. Now, the conversation has movement rather than a repetitive question and answer pattern. This creates another important principle. Give the other person something to respond to. If you only ask questions, you place all the responsibility for creating the conversation on them. But if you contribute your own thoughts, stories, observations, and humor appropriately, you create a shared space. Both people become participants rather than interviewer and interviewee. There's also power in not revealing your entire personality in one conversation. This does not mean deliberately withholding important information or trying to appear mysterious. It simply means accepting that meaningful understanding takes time. You don't need to explain your entire history, every achievement, every opinion, and every ambition immediately. Let experiences reveal your character gradually. People appreciate discovery because it gives relationships room to develop. When someone learns something about you naturally through repeated interactions, that information has more meaning than a long speech designed to establish your value. This is also why exaggeration is unnecessary. You don't need to make your life sound extraordinary. If you have meaningful interests, they will naturally create interesting conversations. If you have goals, you can talk about them without turning them into advertisements for yourself. If you have experiences worth sharing, share them honestly. Authenticity is more sustainable than performance. And there is another side to curiosity that many people ignore. Curiosity about yourself. The more you understand your own interests, values, boundaries, and ambitions, the easier it becomes to communicate naturally. When you know what you enjoy discussing, what you care about, and what you are working toward, you don't need a script. Your own life provides material for conversation. This is why building a full life is more effective than trying to manufacture an attractive personality. Read, learn, create, explore, develop skills, spend time with people who matter to you, pursue meaningful goals. The more experiences you collect, the more naturally you have things to say. But remember that curiosity must work both ways. You should also pay attention to whether the other person is interested in continuing the interaction. Healthy communication involves mutual participation. If someone gives short responses, seems distracted, or clearly wants space, respect that. Genuine curiosity never becomes entitlement. This is where maturity separates itself from manipulation. Manipulation asks, how can I make this person more interested? Authentic communication asks, are we both interested in this conversation? One focuses on control. The other focuses on connection. When you stop trying to manufacture curiosity, you become more relaxed. You no longer need to create artificial mystery or calculate how long to wait before responding. You simply allow things to unfold. Some conversations become meaningful. Others remain brief. Some people connect with you, others don't. You accept all of these outcomes without treating them as judgments of your worth. The most compelling person is not necessarily the one who reveals the least. It is often the person whose life contains enough substance that there is always something genuine left to discover. So don't manufacture mystery. Build depth, stay curious, contribute naturally, and allow people to discover you at their own pace. Real curiosity is not created by hiding yourself. It is created by having something real to discover. The final lesson is the one that brings everything together. Detach yourself from the outcome. This is where confidence stops being an act and becomes part of who you are. You can communicate well, listen carefully, respect boundaries, maintain your own life, and create genuine curiosity. But if you still need a particular result from every interaction, you remain emotionally dependent on the outcome. You may appear confident on the outside, but internally you are still waiting for someone else to confirm your worth. Detachment changes that completely. Imagine entering a conversation with one goal. You must make this person like you. Immediately, pressure appears. You start monitoring every word. You wonder whether you sounded interesting enough. You become sensitive to every pause, every expression, every change in tone. Instead of experiencing the conversation, you are evaluating yourself through another person's reaction. The interaction becomes a performance, and performances create tension. Now imagine entering the same conversation with a different mindset. You are interested in meeting the person. You are willing to listen. You are willing to share your own thoughts. You are comfortable with the possibility that you may connect or you may not. You don't need to force anything. You don't need to impress anyone. You simply allow the interaction to reveal what it naturally is. Notice the difference. In the first situation, you are chasing an outcome. In the second, you are participating in an experience. The second mindset creates far more freedom because you are no longer asking another person to determine your emotional state. This is what genuine detachment means. It does not mean becoming cold. It does not mean pretending not to care. It does not mean ignoring people to make them chase you. It means caring without becoming dependent. You can enjoy someone's company without needing their approval. You can appreciate someone's attention without needing it constantly. You can hope that a connection develops without believing that you must make it happen. This distinction is incredibly important because many people confuse attraction with control. They search for techniques designed to make another person respond in a certain way. They wonder how long to wait before replying, how much attention to give, when to withdraw, or how to create jealousy. But once you start trying to control another person's emotions, you have already lost something important: authenticity. Real confidence does not require a strategy for controlling someone else's feelings. It requires control over your own behavior. You cannot decide whether someone will like you. You cannot guarantee that someone will understand you. You cannot force another person to become interested. You cannot control whether a conversation continues or ends. What you can control is whether you remain respectful, honest, composed, and true to your values. That is where your power exists. When you detach from the outcome, rejection also changes its meaning. Instead of seeing rejection as proof that something is wrong with you, you can see it as information. Two people may simply have different personalities, interests, priorities, or timing. Not every connection is meant to develop into something deeper. That is not a tragedy. It is simply reality. The emotionally dependent person treats every rejection like a verdict. The emotionally independent person treats it like an answer, and an answer gives you freedom. You no longer have to spend days wondering what you could have done differently. You don't have to invent complicated explanations. You don't have to chase someone who has clearly chosen distance. You can respect their decision and continue living your own life. This is also why detachment makes communication more natural. When you are not afraid of losing someone's attention, you can speak honestly. You can disagree without panic. You can admit that you don't know something. You can allow a conversation to end without desperately searching for another topic. You can laugh when something awkward happens. Instead of becoming consumed by embarrassment, you become present. And presence is one of the most valuable qualities in any interaction. A person who is genuinely present is not constantly calculating. They are listening. They are observing. They are responding to what is actually happening rather than following a mental script. This creates a sense of ease, but detachment requires an important foundation. You must have a life outside the interaction. If one conversation becomes the most important event in your day, it becomes difficult to remain detached. If your entire sense of excitement depends on one person's attention, every small change in their behavior will feel enormous. That is why the earlier principles matter. Build your own interests, protect your time, develop your abilities, spend time with people who genuinely matter to you, work toward meaningful goals, learn things because you are curious. Create a life that does not disappear when someone's attention does. Then another person's presence becomes an addition rather than a necessity. This does not make you less caring. In fact, It can make your relationships healthier because you are no longer approaching people from fear. You can appreciate them without trying to possess their attention. You can give them space without interpreting distance as rejection. You can respect their choices while maintaining your own dignity. And there is something else that happens when you become detached. You become less concerned with appearing attractive and more concerned with becoming authentic. You stop asking, what should I do to make this person like me? You start asking, am I being honest about who I am? That question is far more valuable because the goal should never be to become a perfect performance designed to attract everyone. The goal is to become comfortable enough with yourself that you can communicate without pretending. Some people will connect with you deeply, some will not. Both outcomes are acceptable. Your responsibility is not to control the response. Your responsibility is to control the quality of your character. Eventually, you reach a point where attention feels good, but its absence does not destroy your peace. Compliments are appreciated, but they do not define you. Rejection may disappoint you, but it does not diminish you. Connection is welcome, but it is never forced. That is true detachment. And when you stop needing a particular outcome from other people, you finally become free to experience them as they are, not as something you must control, impress, or possess.